So Mike here from M Squared Enjoying the Now. In this video I am going to give you our assessment of the Unbeetable Harvest, which we did this year up in Crookston, Minnesota. So hopefully this will be a short video. Give you as much information as I can without making it too long, and kind of give you an idea how everything worked. So sit back and enjoy the next 4.5 hours. Just kidding. Hopefully it won't be that long. So my job here at the Crookston yard, I was hired on as a foreman. And since this was my first year, I had to go through a little training, so I started working September 14th. Did a lot of training, learned how to run the pilers. I got familiar with the skid steers and the loader because they're all brand new, they're all electronic, all computerized, which made it really nice. And the actual season started October 1st, the actual beet harvest. So everything up to that point is what they call pre-pile. And the pre-pile is make sure all the machines are running correctly, all the equipment's running correctly, people getting them trained, getting them all their equipment, safety vests, their hard hat, goggles, gloves, whatever they need to complete the job. So my main job was pretty much crew safety. I did work the night shift, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. It's pretty dark out there, so I during pre-pile worked during the day, so I got familiar with all the roads, all the equipment, knew where everything was at. So we also made sure that all the pilers are running correctly. No hydraulic leaks, all the belts, all the chains, everything was ready to go for the season. We also made sure that the beets are getting piled correctly, because you have to make a sweep left and right. A lot of these piles are 150 feet wide, so you got to make sure you're making a nice horseshoe shape and all the beets are falling correctly. We start out, some of the pilers start out about 20 feet and we go up to about 30 to 32 feet. We also make sure the ramps stay clean. We try to avoid as much dirt on the ramps as possible. Safer for everybody, safer for the vehicles. You get too many swish beets out there, they're real juicy and slippery in the mud. So that's the safety factor. So we're always cleaning the pad all around the machine from everywhere. I also move dirt to a main pile, so when the dirt gets collected up around the pilers, it's got to go somewhere. So there's a couple main piles that it gets dumped into, and then some farmers will come pick that up later on in the season and put it back on their fields for mulch or whatever they're, put the nutrients back into the soil. also brief each other. So since I was a foreman on night shift, I would brief the oncoming shift and vice versa. So if anything happened, equipment failures, stuff like that, we would keep each other informed along with the supervisors. So for the most part, job was pretty easy. Just kind of made sure everything was running correctly. But again, then it was at night, so a little bit more of a risk factor in there, making sure everybody's out of the way. All the lights are working correctly, and you'll see on the videos how dark it actually gets out there. There's always breakdowns, vehicles breaking down, the beat trucks breaking down, flat tires, hydraulic leaks, can't get their engine started. One night we did have to pull a truck off an M dump, and it was still full of beets. So we had to pull it around to the back of the pile. He raised his bed, and then I slowly pulled him forward so he can dump his load, and then we pulled him outside. After we weighed him out, got to pull him across the scale. He weighed out, and then we took him to a safe location where he got help from his mechanic. Another part of being a foreman out there was making sure that the pilers stay aligned on the pad. So we try to keep them as dead center as possible. That makes for the beats piling going a lot easier. You're not off to one side or the other. And here's an example of a piler being realigned. And pilers do break down, numerous reasons. We did have to, our mechanics had to replace a conveyor belt on one of the end dumps. A load of beets that came in had a couple giant rocks in it and got stuck up on some of the bearings and then ripped the conveyor belt almost in half, so it all had to be disassembled and a new belt put on. And probably my favorite part of being a foreman was working the chop stand. Well, here I am in chop stand on the north scale.
Alright, we'll get a skid through there as quick as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Once the temperature gets down to freezing, we got to check the beets out of every truck, 3 or 4 of them. Make sure there's no frost buildup. If we get too much more than a half an inch, then we got to divert them. They either got to dump their load back at the farm, we may pick it up later, or they can dump it on one of the piles that the factory's taken first. Actually, it's not too bad out. Looks like I'm cold, but I'm not. Not a lot of humidity. Good. Snifty little beet chopping knife called an Ontario knife. Don't know why, but works pretty good. Good. There's truck after truck after truck. Even saved a beet here. I've been eating chunks off of it. It's not pretty bad. It's pretty sweet fiber. It's kind of scary, the trucks. You can see how close the trucks get. That's far away. Go ahead. Some get really close. The thing here during beet harvest, you can drive a truck for a farmer. You don't need a CDL. DOT waives the requirements on a CDL license. Size that baby. Nice and juicy.
Your job sucks.
Oh, tell me about it. Good. Waiting for one to give me some coffee. As you can see, it's not everybody's favorite part, but when it does get below freezing, we got to make sure not too many beets come in that have a lot of frost in that top part of the crown. And we did find 1 or 2 loads that had to be dumped in a certain location where it was going to be processed pretty quick, because once it starts warming up in the pile, they don't want all that stuff to get all mushy and start bleeding all over the place. And we are also watching, making sure that the culverts that some of the piles have underneath them for cold air to go through, we want to make sure the culverts are being placed properly and they're backfilled. Once they backfill them, that gives them a little resistance, so when those beets come sliding down the hill, they won't blow those culverts out, because they have to go straight across, because crystal sugar will come and dig all the beets out. So if the culverts aren't placed correctly, they could hit them culverts when they're digging the beets out. So we make sure that they're lined up from side to side, fan to fan. We don't want them sideways or at a weird angle, and so the culverts don't get damaged when the beets are dug up. So one part of the beet piling is samples have to be taken. So when a sample's taken, one of the crew members will grab a bag, put a slip in there that came from the truck driver, and press a button, and this big scoop will go down into the beet flow, pick a few beets, and those will be returned into this funnel, and they'll be collected in a bag. They get bundled up, and then they will get taken off to the lab to see what the sugar content is. So the farmers get paid by tonnage, but they also get a bonus at the end of the year for sugar content. So the higher the sugar content, the more their bonus will be at the end of the year. So the hardest part wasn't really hard, it was more challenging, I guess, was piling beets in the 2 deep freezes, the 2 buildings, number 6 and 8. So they have to pile beets in each corner, get them up to the correct height, and then the machine has to be backed out a little bit. They'll fill in the center, and then they'll just go from there, filling from side to side to side up to 30 feet high. Make sure there's not a lot of overflow over the bunkers, because those beets have to be put back on the pile. And the majority of the time, if you can't get to them with a skid steer, you got to do it by hand. So somebody from the crew has got to go back there and start pitching beets and put them back up on the pile, and that is not fun. I did it for an hour or two, and that's exhausting. So when the deep freeze gets completed, or it's getting close to the end, we got to put more bunkers up at the other end. They weren't placed at the beginning because the truck's got to turn and go back out. So when it gets close to the pilot exiting the building, we got to put up some bunkers so the beets don't fall out into the metal or get in the way. And as you can see here, the trucks have a very tight turn radius. A lot of them got to back up, jackknife a little bit to get back out of the building. It's even harder when the piler gets closer to the door. Then we can only take small trucks because there's the door frame across the top, and we want short trucks because they won't hit the door frame. So once the piler exits the building, then we can start taking the longer trucks. That way their bed won't be in danger of hitting the door frame, and a little easier for them to turn around. So as you can see here on the floor of the deep freeze, there's vents in the floor. Works as the same principle as the culverts out in the yard. Here it's just that the culverts are buried into the concrete, and there's little vents on the floor that'll blow the chilled air through the beets. So the two buildings, 6 and 8, will stay in deep freeze. Those will be the last two piles of beets that will get sent to the factory. And from what I was told, that's usually around May, June time frame when they start doing those beets. So once the machine clears the door, the bunkers are up, the buildings are full, the piler will continue to operate, filling the rest of the pad up on the outside. So sometimes some of the boom operators, they're out front, they got a little remote control that makes the boom go left and right. Sometimes they have to climb the pile and get up there to get a good look, making sure all the beets are being piled correctly and not overflowing on left or right or getting too much up onto the metal. You only want it to go as high as that concrete wall on either side. So what happens after harvest? As you can see here in these videos, they bring in a snowcat to level off the tops of all the beet piles. reason why they're doing this is that they will put tarps over them. And we don't want it, they don't want all the piles all different heights up there, so they'll smooth it out. Makes it a lot easier for people who are going to be climbing up there to pull the tarps across the beet piles. And of course all the fans on either side will blow cold air in there to stabilize the beets so they won't ferment or start juicing out. So we're also going to make sure all the pilers are clean. We're going to move them away from the piles because the factory will come in with their equipment and start collecting the beets and taking them to get processed. So once we back out the piler, like I said, make sure it's clean. We're going to wrap up the cord, make sure all the hand tools are removed, placed in storage. We also have to collect all the porta potties that are at the different locations and the scale houses, put them in a central location for the company to come and pick those up. So also the skid steers and the loaders, any of the equipment that's been rented, we'll place it in a central location and get all that ready. So this harvest, I guess they set quite a few records. So the Crookston yard completed their harvest in right around 6 days. There was one or two stragglers out there that had truck problems or whatever, so they brought them in a little bit later, but for the most part the yard completed in 6 days. So in the Crookston yard alone there was 1,500,000 tons of beets brought in. So of the whole district there was 10.1 million tons of beets piled. So on day 3 of harvest, 3rd of October, we already surpassed all the beets that were piled last year. And we still had 3 or 4 days to go. In 4 days, the Crookston yard piled 500,000 tons of beets. In one of those days, in a 24-hour period, there were 6,000 beet trucks that came through the yard. So the scope of the operation, what do all those beets look like? Piler 12, or Pile 12. 1,100 feet long, 150 feet wide, and 30 feet high. That's bigger than 3 football fields. So, will we be back next year? Don't really know right now. We're not sure what's going to happen in 2021 with us. For the most part, I think we are going to return. It was a great year. We heard some nightmares about years before with snow and rain and wind. Really no big deal. I didn't mind working the night shift. It was kind of good. We were always busy, so the time went by pretty quick. Just have to wait and see. We did hear that the RV park is going to be turned into a mobile home park. People say yes or no on that. They're not sure if they're going to do it or not. But the city of Crookston did get federal funding to redo their park in the middle of town down by the river. So I guess we'll have to get a van and live down by the river. So if you're interested in finding a job working the beet harvest, there's numerous ones, Michigan, North Dakota, Montana, and then where we're at in the main yard in Crookston, Minnesota. You can contact Express Employment. You can also go to Facebook, the Unbeatable Experience, and there'll be hundreds of people on there sharing their experience also. And you can just message them and they can send you information on next year's harvest. Or you can contact Crystal Sugar directly. They're always looking for people to work in the factory and in the yard. So that's all for now. If you have any questions about our experience or anything else I left out, just let me know and I'll try to answer them for you. So give us a thumbs up, subscribe, click on that little bell, and you'll be notified of more videos. Hope you enjoyed it. Later.